All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the TheReticLounge. We are doing another species spotlight for you guys tonight. This is one that I'm super interested in. This is an animal that I always like holding at shows. Like, it's one of the animals that always catches my eyes when I'm at a zoo, at a show, wherever, that has carpet pythons. And Lucas and I thought of no better person to have on to talk with us tonight than our friend Riley Jimison of Riley's Reptiles. Lucas,
Yeah.
is there anything you want to add?
No, I'm excited for this one. I think that when it comes to the whole like Morelia complex, I'm like extremely fascinated by them, and carpet pythons just seem, again, a little ignorant here. I had, when I was growing up, I had a coastal carpet that I bought at a pet store, and had that snake for about 3-4 years, and then before I moved off to college, I rehomed it. And so I don't know. I think that they're really awesome animals, and from my limited understanding, they're like a really great entry level snake that is like a larger size. But I guess we'll get Riley to kind of confirm that. But
Yeah, and I mean, almost what you would expect people to get into before the whole super dwarf craze.
right, right,
But I mean, a big part of my recovery after surgery was just listening to NPR. So, I mean, I got to learn a little bit about these guys. And then when I got to see them in person, it was just a little bit more appreciation. So, hopefully, Riley can shed a little bit more light tonight.
yeah. Before we jump in and bring Riley on, just want to remind you guys, if you guys are not subscribed and you're running into this channel because you might be subscribed to Riley's content, or you're in the carpet world and want to hear this episode, hit the subscribe button for us, hit that like button, drop some comments down below, and always we want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon fans. You guys rock. We've gotten a few new members over the last week, and it's been great having our Discord just kind of popping and going off. I know I had Friday off, and so I got to be very active on it on Friday. That was a lot of fun. So if you guys are interested, we have that link that's right down below, patreon.com/TheReticLounge. And by far, I think one of the most active Patreon or Discords out there associated with the Patreon. And yeah,
For retics, for sure.
yeah, Retics for sure. I don't know too many other Retic
I
ones,
was going to
but
say Discord and Patreon, comedians, they blow us out of the water.
oh yeah, no, I reptile related, but yeah, totally. All right, yeah, let's go ahead and get Riley on here. Whether you're just getting into retics or you've been breeding for years, the first place you want to visit is Stewart Design. More and more breeders keep showing up at shows, on Morph Market, and are all over social media. Sometimes it may feel possible to get anyone's attention. Stewart Designs helps small businesses like yours do big things through brand clarity, helping entrepreneurs to start and scale businesses that are easy to know and love. Their work can help any company or industry, but they've done a ton of work for ours. Stewart Design created the brands for USARK, Canova, Reach Out Reptiles, Coiled, and dozens of other well-known reptile breeders. Like many of us, the owner of Stewart Design, Blake, is a keeper and breeder who fell in love with retics through first working with Garrett Hartle. Although Stewart Design does a lot of corporate work, Blake has a passion for working with people in the reptile industry. Stewart Design can help if you're just getting started or you're ready to take things to the next level, you're struggling to stand out and build your presence online or at shows, you don't want to be like the other guys or get lost in the crowd, and you want to make your own way doing what you love. And also, you have big ideas and know your business is special, but you need help sharing it with the reptile community. If something here resonates with you, reach out to Blake and have a conversation. To learn more or get started, visit stewartdesignbrands.com or call them at 855 SD Logos. Clear brands own markets. Stewart Design helps create them. If you are in the market for an enclosure for your reticulated python or any other one of your reptiles, Focus Cubed Habitats is your one-stop shop for not only the best looking cages on the market, but also provide amazing features and add-ons to your cages. We partnered with Focus Cubed Habitats because they continue to innovate and change the way we house our animals unlike any other caging company out there. Their cages are designed intelligently and provide the most stylish and secure housing for your animals' comfort and well-being. Visit focuscubedhabitats.com for your animal's caging needs. Again, visit focuscubedhabitats.com for some amazing and stylish enclosures.
We also want to thank VivTech Products for being an affiliate sponsor of the TheReticLounge. Stop by VivTech Products for the best UV spectrum lighting on the market that will enhance and improve your snake's overall well-being and health. Visit VivTechProducts.com and use the code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Again, visit VivTechProducts.com and use our affiliate code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Looking for the perfect accessories for your hatchlings or juvenile retics? Look no further than HeliGuy Serpents. Our sponsor, Chris Sexton, is coming in hot with an amazing 3D printer, creating top-notch perches and other caging accessories for your beloved pets. Enrich your retics environment with their high-quality products. Use our promo code TRL10 for a 10% discount on your purchase. Visit them today at HeliGuySerpents.com and start giving your pets the best. HeliGuy Serpents, the premier source for 3D printed caging accessories. Again, that's www.HeliGuySerpents.com and use our promo code TRL10 for 10% off all of your 3D printed accessories today. Hey, Riley.
There he is.
What up? How we doing?
What's going on, man?
Doing good, man. I like the shirt.
Oh yeah, gotta pull one out once in a while.
The OGs.
I wear them sparingly because otherwise they'll fade from just years of abuse and wash, and I like to keep them as long as I can. But I've got an accumulation of some that are hitting like 2 decades old that probably need to be turned into a quilt in order for preservation to occur at this point.
I turn all of my old deathcore shirts into like just cutoffs for the gym or whatever once they start ripping.
Oh yeah, that's true. The armpit holes always start first, and then you're like, well, sleeves got to go. Makes sense.
Either that or right around the collar. But we're here to talk reptiles. Sorry, I saw the metal shirt and I'm like, okay, he's one after my heart.
Riley, man, appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. Short notice too. Called you up, I think it was on Thursday, and was like, hey, you want to record this weekend? You're like, sure. So always appreciate the short notice flexibility and willingness. And yeah, I think I've gotten to know you over like the last 8 to 10 months through MJ's Patreon.
Yep.
And you know, the chat that we have going on, and your carpets are just absolutely phenomenal. And you know, I probably couldn't think of anyone else that I want to come on here to do carpet. So I'm really excited to jump into that. But before we do that, let's go ahead for our listeners that, you know, maybe haven't heard of you, kind of talk about yourself and, you know, how you got into snakes and your love, passion for carpets, when that started, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, like many folks, as a kid, I was that dinosaur obsessed, you know, at like that 5-year age or whatever. So there's photos of me wearing like t-shirts with like all the different dinosaurs and stuff, while my friends are wearing like Niner shirts and stuff like that.
Pop quiz.
And
What's
like,
your favorite dinosaur?
I think Ankylosaur, the dudes
cool.
that are kind of like the tortoise with the swinging club. Nobody ever talks about them. They're an underdog. To me, that's like the herbivorous honey badger of dinosaurs that nobody wants to mess with.
Yeah, my daughter likes the Ankylosaurus.
That's my favorite skeleton to see at the Natural History Museum.
Oh, it's really just cool. So like, other than the big plates on a stegosaur, or the big, you know, frill and horns on a triceratops, like that's a really unique biological design. A very successful design attempt, in my opinion.
Right. Anyways, continue. Sorry to interrupt.
But yeah, so dinosaur obsessed as a kid, and then not by like any real natural like train through my family or anything. I spontaneously had this love of reptiles, right? It's not like somebody else in my family got me into it. My mom's always been a huge animal lover. We've always had dogs, cats, you know, horses around. Like, I grew up around horses with my mom, and I don't ride them because I've been stepped on enough times, falling off Clydesdales. I'm just like, I'm good, man. Those are dangerous. And so when I was around 8, I think I was pestering them for a snake, and it took a full year of going to the library every Tuesday with my dad and proving that it wasn't just a passing fad, and like doing research and showing how like I was genuinely interested. And then somewhere between like my ninth and 10th birthday or something like that, my dad got me a California king snake and a
Nice.
herpetology book, and the rest was history. And granted, back then I didn't know anything about husbandry. I kept that thing on blue and green colored place, and just in my place. And the thing got out every couple of weeks because back then the tanks didn't have any latches. The slides just scotch tape was as good as I could get, and it would disappear for weeks or months at a time. And then I'd find it in the neighbor's yard. One time it fell off the neighbor's roof and landed on her and freaked her
Oh
out. And
my gosh, that's
ran and scooped it up, was
classic.
like, there he is, sweet, and ran home. Was like, cool, awesome.
That's awesome.
um and then one day he got out, and that was his last Houdini. And I like to think that, being a native, he had another 20 years of living in South Bay Marsh area, hunting mice and doing well. So that was what really kicked it off. And then growing up, always had animals around the house, like everything: bearded dragons, leopard geckos. At one point, like birds, rabbits, dogs, like cats, everything, freaking zoo.
I have to
And
ask because we're around the same age. Did you have any of the import iguanas from back then?
no, no, no,
I
I
did.
was not, I was not down with like going after big lizards. Those things still intimidated me at the time. Like I wasn't fully fledged like into my obsession. Like bigger things like that, I was just kind of like, oh no, I don't trust you.
I think my parents naively like bought them just because they were babies when the pet store had them.
People still do to this day, man. Like they
Yep.
still do.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah,
My
somewhere along the line, I avoided some of those mistakes. But we had a bearded dragon that ended up turned out she was a female, and my brother's older brother at the time was getting into reptiles, and this was late 90s. And we loaned him our female bearded dragon because he had a male, and he bred her. And then one day invited us over to his family's mechanic shop where he kept his reptiles for us to go see the babies. And I have a terrible memory throughout my entire childhood, but I do remember going into this mechanic shop, seeing a tank of a couple dozen baby beardies, and just scooping like a grip of them in my hands, and just being fully exposed to something completely new that I'd only seen in books and on TV. And I also remember looking across the shop and seeing a big wooden cage that he made with a big yellow and white snake. So, he had, an albino berm, presumably, or something at that point too, which, thinking back about the time, that's kind of badass.
how old were you, roughly?
Probably 9.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, 9 or 10.
What a cool experience.
Um, yeah, and I don't, it was a long time after that where that sort of kind of fell to the wayside and then returned. And in college, when I finally was on my own, I was getting more things. I rescued a Chinese water dragon from a family that didn't know what they were doing, and took it upon myself to, nurse this thing back to health. It had a broken leg. It was missing most of its face and all of its tail. And 8 years later, it had rebounded into this big, beautiful, majestic thing as best as it could. And I learned a lot in that process. And it was right around the time when I was getting out of college, where I was trying to figure out what to do with my life.
I
And I
want
started volunteering at the zoo.
so when that happened, it was around college time.
The water dragon thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actively in college.
Okay, because I was gonna say, I mean, but you had it even so. If you had it for 7, 8 years, before it blossomed into this thing, I mean, that just goes to show, like, rehabbing an animal like that as a teenager and kid, like, obviously, I think weighs a lot. And like, you're like, just you geeked out on reptiles. You read about them.
Dude,
You learned about them.
I went hardcore. My roommates at that place were super down. They were cool with it. Like they didn't care. They thought it was awesome. So I brought them home with what they had, which was not adequate,
Mhm.
and basically transformed his enclosure into something that I could. And built a waterfall. Like I got tiles, smash it up, cornered it, siliconed it, built it in this thing, put a pump in, siliconed a whole trough so there's big water. Like there was a really long 40-gallon that was narrow and short, so it was really shitty. But like I drilled holes in the ceiling, I hung lights, I did all this shit, and like I pissed off the landlord, and I didn't care because I was in college. I was like, I'm not getting this deposit anyway, so I just went ham, right? And then one day I was like, screw this, I'm going to get him an even bigger cage. So I drove down to the Vision Cages warehouse in LA and picked up, what I thought was big at the time. I now know you can go much bigger, but it was a 4x2x2 that I still have. And this water dragon, they're supposed to have a tail that is 3 times the length of their snout to vent length, roughly. And he had a tail that was the same length as his snout to vent length because so much was missing. And because he had an old, clearly self-healed and properly broken leg, his mobility wasn't great. So a 4x2x2 was perfect. Like he couldn't run, he couldn't do crazy swimming, but that dude was climbing up a log and belly flopping into his water bowl by the time he was big and had all the abalone colored scales on his throat and was just gorgeous, man. And
That's the best
he,
part about those water dragons.
Dude, they're awesome.
yeah, you can't really get them anymore. They just went CITES, and the main export out of Vietnam, the main spot where they were bringing them in is like, so you're gonna see very few water dragons from here on out.
Can
All
we can
right.
still
Well,
buy captive bred ones?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the importation is going to be very sparse.
Yeah.
you,
So
you heard it here first, folks. I mean, water dragons, their price.
yeah, that's what I was just about to say. We're gonna start to see that price increase if people can
And
successfully.
honestly, like if you know what you're getting into, they're the best alternative for an iguana that people could ask for.
Okay.
It's like a small one. But
Because iguanas are
anyway,
not good alternatives for most people, anyways.
I've gotten more stitches from iguanas than anything else in my life.
We're gonna talk about your bite and stitch history here in a bit because you're pretty notorious for getting rocked.
Before we get too far away, though, you were talking about volunteering at the zoo. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, so that was actually how I got into that career for, the nearly 10 years I did it. I started while I was working at a UPS store in Montecito, right on the edge of Santa Barbara, and I was 2 weeks out from packing my stuff up and moving home because I was like, dude, I'm broke. I can't afford to live here. And I was volunteering there. I had at that point been volunteering for about a year and a half, and I put in a full day and a half day every week helping on the bird and reptile lines to the point where I was so consistent and reliable and kind of knew what they would do themselves, that they started giving me volunteer keys and just like giving me radios and treat me like one of them, to the point where as a volunteer, I helped out with, an alligator exam. And then I think they knew that I was having to leave. And so they offered me an apprenticeship. And then I spent 6 years working in the reptile department there. By the time I had left, I was the main venomous person training incoming venomous keepers, doing all the refresher courses. We worked with a camera company that had all the red cameras, and FLIR come out. And we did some amazing like 900 and something frame per second like heat video of like some pit vipers striking mice. And
That's
I
cool.
bred a super rare and critically endangered fully aquatic box turtle from Mexico that I think is extinct in the wild. I just dove full in, man. Like I didn't go home for Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything for like the first 4 years, and I was like, y'all can come see me. Otherwise, this is my home and this is my life. And I dove full in, and that was when I was like 21, 22. And so it was just like the time of my life. I lived a block away from the bar. I biked and skateboarded to work every day, and it, like, lived on the beach. Life was better. But yeah, then I met my now wife. We moved to Sacramento, got into the zoo there, and then 3 years ago, or a little over that, took an opportunity to manage GX3 reptiles for my boss, Grant, here in town. And
Is that what
that's
you're
where I'm
currently
at.
doing?
Yep. Yep. So my wife is a supervisor at the Sacramento Zoo still. She manages the ungulates and carnivores and
Dude,
stuff.
and she's into animals like you? That's freaking man, that's
Yeah.
like picture perfect right there.
It's totally like power couple status. The downside is, as you very well may know, animals don't care about holidays, weekends, birthdays, or family emergencies. So you're kind of at their mercy. And in order to be fair to every employee and whatnot, nobody ever has Saturday, Sunday weekends. Everybody is there on Thursday, and there's alternating chunks of this is your weekend, this is your weekend, this is your weekend, and it's arranged in such a time or in such a way that there's enough coverage on every line and sector so that there's always coverage and that everybody is given as fair and equal shot to time off as possible. And every zoo has their own methodology of how that shakes out. But everywhere I've gone, that's kind of, the footprint that makes the most sense. So, but yeah, so she does that. So of course, naturally, our house is a zoo. Cats, tortoises. We've had guinea pigs, frogs. I somehow found myself bringing home a box turtle this year, like the snake room, geckos, and whatever. But yeah,
That's
it's
that's
fun.
that's my dream home. I just got a wife who
Yeah.
handcuffs me. She's like, if you don't have any more, she's like, if you don't have any more room in the garage, that's it.
Yep. Yeah. So it's never boring, that's for sure. Never a dull moment. We've got tons of stories, Like if you put one of us on the spot, we could probably find one and then snowball into others. But like it's usually we realize in reflection how wild our careers and lives are when we're like, catching up with family or something like that. Because to us, it's just another day, which sounds really kind of rude to say, but yeah, I mean, like,
Well, it's a lot of people's dreams, and what I love hearing about your story is like your passion ignited as a child, like 99% of us that, at least most of the people we have on here, but like you just like you full sent and you did it. Like you did the childhood dream that like most of us had.
I, you
And
know,
that's the
I
pretty
think
cool
that's how you
part.
got to do it. I think that's how you got to do it. Like there are late bloomers who find it later in life, and like in their 20s, and they're like, "Wow, I used to be scared of these things," and they go on that trajectory, and that's amazing. That's a beautiful story. But
Right.
yeah, man, I skateboarded my entire life from the time I was 7 and determined to land my first heel flip to the time I was 22 years old, and I decided that I needed to make a decision that it either came to zookeeping or skateboarding, because the first time I had to hop into a tortoise yard on an ankle that had torn all the ligaments and tendons in it, was held together with a brace, and then carry a tortoise back
Ooh.
and work on said
Nope.
foot for a month. I was like, this is not the jam. And so I
I
kind of
stopped.
just the
I
brakes.
stopped.
Never ended. And so I think she was really grateful to learn that when I got in the zoo, it also meant that I was backing off from that, which in hindsight is probably good, because I like having a job.
Right. Right. And I mean, we talked about following your dreams, and I'm not here to try to crush anyone's dream, but I still got friends back at home that are in their 30s still trying to pursue the skateboard thing, and I'm like,
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's one in a million, and I mean, it's cool
It's
that it's
Mhm.
now an Olympic sport and it's
right.
respected more and more, and around the world it's growing. But it's just like becoming an NFL athlete or anything else. It's the top 1% of the top 1%. So,
Right.
go for your dreams, but if you don't make it, don't feel bad about looking in another direction, because that I struggled with for a long time. I struggled with accepting that I was not as good as some of my friends that were naturally gifted, getting sponsored and going on world trips and, all these things. And I was just
Doing the thing.
busting my ass at the park like a bum. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's hard to, hang up the cleats. Like I had an opportunity to go to an independent professional baseball league after college, but with the way that my knee was after surgery senior year of high school, I was like, am I really going to just try to drag this out as an adult,
Mm,
to get paid like, man, I think one of the like $960 every 2 weeks. Right.
oof.
And it's like, oh, don't worry though. They pay for your meals when you're traveling to games. Um, so yeah, it just one of those things where you got to just stomach it and just say, it's time.
Yeah. Zookeeping is a lot like that, oddly enough, to transition back to that.
Hmm.
Zookeeping can quite often be like that. I would say it's the top 1% that, by a combination of luck and timing and other variables out of your control, some people find a way to put themselves in a position to climb the ropes into supervisor and upper management and get into retirement. But it's not everybody, and not every zoo is going to do that, because you're ultimately a limited field position, a field of positions with a lot of people trying to get in. So you're at the
Yeah.
mercy of people retiring,
Yeah.
moving on, things like that.
I would assume, and if you're working at a zoo, you got love and passion for animals. And once you get to a position where you're supervising or, you work your way up, they're paying you a decent amount for you to be able to live. Like I wouldn't want to leave that position.
Yeah, yeah. It seems that, like, at the 1, 2, 3 keeper levels, apprentice, normal, and senior, however they phrase it at different facilities, a lot of places, those types of keepers have second jobs and live with roommates and rent, especially if you were like us in Santa Barbara. I at one point had 3 jobs and 4 roommates. You know what I mean? Like but
And,
it's
you could afford under a bridge.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Man, I lived in a garage for a couple of years, um, while I was growing my Morelia love. Oddly enough, it was a converted garage. That was when I was also still sort of letting go of skateboarding. But yeah, man,
Let
it's one of those things that you just, unless you can make it into supervisor deal, it's a chapter of your life that you accept and have fun, and then a lot of us grow into something else, and it makes for wonderful reminiscing stories and great memories in the future.
Oh, I bet. Um, let's talk about the garage days and when your Morelia stuff started coming up. How old were you around then? And where'd you first come across Morelia, and what was your first reaction on? Obviously, it's something that you're obsessed with now.
Yeah, I know exactly where I was. So I was living in that garage. Um, I at the time had my blacktail crebo, my rainbow boa, and then a small, very small, like 8 maybe animals of ball pythons. And at that point, the water dragon had aged and passed on. Um, and I was looking for a second job. I found this guy listing on Craigslist that he needed help once a week taking care of his reptile collection. I was like, "Whew, lucky stars!" But it was like an hour and 10 away up the freeway. I was like, at the time, gas was not crazy like it is. So I was like, all right, I'll do it once a week. And we negotiated that. He ended up sort of like paying my like $250 a visit, sort of a deal. So I was like, hell yeah, this is great. And the first time I walked into his reptile room, um, I remember looking in a boa file cage and seeing his big adult female jungle that he had at the time staring back at me, uh, just intent, big muscly head, jet black eyes,
I love
that
that about them.
quintessential black and yellow, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
Just hooked, man. Um, I was still intimidated by them at the time. I had come under that reputation that these things were a little bit defensive and bitey. Not the really blown out reputation that they get 10 feet and they're monsters and they never grow out of it sort of thing. But I had a little bit of understanding that these things they're from Australia. They don't mess around.
Right.
Yeah.
And so slowly working with a couple clutches of juveniles that this guy had acquired and some other animals, I got to know the animals specifically and how they behave and move and react and respond because he sort of would just leave me to his devices. And that ended up, lasting about a year or so before he kind of fell on hard times and wasn't able to pay me. We'll just say, we'll leave it at that. Um, but hooks were in. So at that point, I'm, working at the zoo. I'm 22, 23, and I'm realizing that I need to start amassing some of these. So I start, getting some here, there. I start meeting some of my friends that I'm still very close with today, like Tony Dorer, Brandon Wheeler, Terrell Ziegler, Andy Ray. Um, who else? There's like the Cusco, Brian Cusco was in that whole window, Travis Johnson, like this whole
Yeah.
amalgam of people between like where I was at in Santa Barbara and Brian in the Atascadero and like Travis and then the SoCal group and Simi Valley. Like we just sort of all 6 or 7 of us just kind of converged all at the same time, became good friends at the same time. And yeah, as good reptile friends do, you sort of rub off on one another. You get inspired by their love of something, and you test the waters, or you expand something that you're already involved in. And I just went, even further into Morelia because of Travis a lot, because he was plugged in with Nick Mutton already. He was, decades into Morelia already. He'd started at 13 with Brandon. They grew up together. They got into it. So I remember spending till 3, 4 in the morning sitting in Travis's snake room at times when we'd go up there, and we started a carpet fest chapter and we'd all just sit there and talk stories all night. And he has all sorts of boas and bull snakes and everything else. He's an eclectic keeper, but yeah, man, I was just like I would just absorb and sponge it all in, and it felt like this subculture within reptiles that had been slept on, and I was just like finding this diamond in the rough that nobody was seeing. I was like, nobody sees these things. Like, this is the most exciting discovery that nobody cares about, in my opinion. And it's not like a discovery. I meant like I'm discovering them. But yeah, that just snowballed, man. It was game over, and along the way I dabbled in like Amazon tree boas and humerals boas and
Dude, you got
uh
an awesome collection right now too.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's I'd say 85% carpet pythons, and then, like a pair of corns, a pair of crebos, a pair of womas, some apodora, a
Dude,
chondro, a couple
the
geckos.
Apodora band.
My female actually just shed the other day, my big girl. So I'm gonna
Prelay?
throw.
Pre-follicular? She got there?
I don't think so. I think it was like a post sort of like winter weird shed, and
Gotcha.
I've been throwing the male in for the last month, and then she went into shed, and to me, if anything, that is a result of the male going because she hadn't fed in a month and a half because I was just kind of giving them a break. Um, I don't know. They're at
Dude,
least a
that's
pair and they're
crazy.
comfortable.
Giving them a month and a half off of food and keeping them together
I
when
was
they
gonna
very well
say.
can eat each other. That's awesome. That they like each other. They're
And
homies.
then now, after talking with Ryan Young, he's like, "Well, I kind of do the opposite thing with my endo stuff." He's like, "So I separate, feed, give them a couple days of pair." And I was like, "You do that with these
Same.
too?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "All right, cool."
Yeah.
So now I'm doing that. I think I gave him 5 weeks with no food, and they're all
Yeah.
right. They're
Have you
Yeah.
cool.
ever had any like dicey situations with pairing those?
Nah,
Which
not with
is
Okay.
them.
huge. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's cool.
I'm
Not with
sure
them.
I'm sure that the bad stuff can happen and they can definitely eat each other. And I'm wondering if it's one of those things that have happened in the past that we tend to like, maximize, right?
Well,
Like,
or
or is it
if you talk to Ryan Young, he says it's he feels it's probably a case of a male being missexed as a female or vice
Could
versa,
be. Could
Okay.
be.
which would make
And, Ry-
sense
and
because like,
Ryan Young is the Python king, so I'll listen to anything that dude says. Just about.
and then think about it logically though, like most people are starting with subadult to adult wild caught animals. You know how freaking hard it is to try and sex an apodora of that size that does not want anything
Wants
to
to
do
kill
with
you.
you, even on a
Yeah.
good day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I see it happening, it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Totally.
But if you know that going into it and you do your due diligence as best you can and you're there when you pair them
Yeah.
and you kind of
Monitor.
just nut up, and if anything's going to happen, it's going to be in the first 30 seconds. You'll see if it's going wrong. They're very
Yep.
expressive snakes, I mean, just like retics are with their the shrugging and the body language they tell you, and
Tail
the
wagging.
rapid eye movement or lack thereof, the tail wagging. That's an
Yeah.
amazing
During
thing.
breeding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Because a
is
lot like
very, very
with ball
cool.
pythons, the tail wagging's a good thing.
Yeah,
With retics, you see a female tail wagging and sticking her tail up, you get that male out of there.
yeah. With like my Crebos, if my female's like rattling like a, I'm like, yeah, she don't want you, buddy.
So
Sorry.
we can probably spend hours talking about all your different animals, but for our listeners'
Hmm.
sake, I do want to jump into carpet. So right now, what are you currently keeping as far as like your carpet? You said 85%, 80% of your collection is carpets. What are you keeping as far as like morphs, localities, and like what other I'm curious if there's any that you have that are, quite drastic or different than others in terms of like size or behavior or whatnot.
Yeah, so the excluding rough scale pythons and green tree pythons, which are still currently recognized as Morelia, which is debatable and a completely separate discussion. The only Morelia that you can get in the States that I don't have are diamonds. I don't have any diamond pythons. The
That's
one um, taxa that is not available in the States over in Oz that's abundant are the Southwesterns or the Imbricata. Those things
okay.
Are they
are
among the
amazing.
larger of the locales?
Imbricata are not necessarily larger, but if you've seen the new more complete carpet python, that red gammon range animal that's on the
Dude,
front,
yep.
that's an imbricata.
Of
Okay.
course, the more
And
complete
so,
chondro that it would be that snake on the cover when it was written here in the States. Like they're just
yeah,
taunting us.
yeah, and they deserve to taunt us. I can't even be mad at them. There's a lot of variety because there's some population pockets of imbricata where you get some heavy melanin, you get some red, you get some of that yellow. Carpets are very, very plastic in their generational shift of phenotype based on environment. So if you think from an evolutionary spectrum, the Indo-Australasian sort of python uh, migration of evolution as they got into Australia and they start spreading out over time, the different environments are different, and they sort of, to put it simply, look a lot like their environment as they occupy different niches. So you go into the red center in the center of Australia, and where you find Morelia Bradley, and it's a lot of red sand. Well, is there any coincidence why that snake is red? Probably
Makes
not.
sense. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on. They seem to match their environment, and it's really well demonstrated in what we now know as the northern the northern coastals, Morelia spilota cheney, which is a new change based on the new publication. So you have what is considered two coastal populations of a northern and a southern, and the northerns are technically, from a DNA standpoint, exactly the same as the jungles, which we have historically referred to as Morelia spilota cheney. So those northern coastals are technically the same as the jungles up there. It's just a rainforest phenotype sort of a deal, but they are distinctly different looking. So we still consider them distinct and different. But with this new DNA analysis, we know better. The problem is when all the Australian stuff was coming into the States that wasn't known nor delineated. And so what we have in the States is an amalgam of the two. So it's like this third group. So you have your coastals, you have Papuan carpets up in New Guinea, you have Darwins, which are in the most northern range and very closely related to the New Guinea animals. You have Brettles, you have Imbricata, you have inlands, you have diamonds, jungles, and then there's little locality variants within that.
Dude, I
So
would go broke if I went into the carpet, because me being a locality freak, I would literally want every little. Dude, thank goodness that I haven't
yeah,
like dove into carpets, but the curse that these species spotlights have on me, at least, and I don't know about Nathan, but every single time we have someone on to talk about a snake that I've already liked, right? Or a reptile that I've already liked, and then we have a guest on to talk about them, like it's the next thing that I'll probably Google for the next 2 weeks and have
yeah.
to convince myself to not freaking get one.
Yeah, I know how
He's
that
putting
goes.
it lightly. It's the next thing he's hiding from the wife.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I'm about to, I won't say, but me and Ryan Young are talking, and we're about to trade sending him a pair of Solayers for a pair of snakes that I'm stoked about, even though the snakes are probably going to hate me right off the bat.
I bet you they love you.
Yeah, well, yeah, that it
I'm
depends.
putting the warm fuzzies out there for you.
We'll see. I looked at my couple helpers that come over. I looked at them and I was like, hope y'all are ready to get bit.
Yeah,
Because
those are
none
fast
of my
too.
snakes in my garage bite. Like I really don't have to worry about getting bit by a snake in my garage. So it'll be a fun change. But
Yeah, keep you on your toes.
do you have do you have a favorite locality, or do you have a favorite, I guess, carpet python?
Uh, it's hard, man. Like if we're talking, favorite morph or favorite species or subspecies, those are two different answers. Um, because within carpets you have species and subspecies breakdown. You have morphs that associate with the various species and subspecies, and then you have localities within some, assuming that's been maintained record keeping wise. And here in the United States, we have Brisbane's, which are southerns, and then we have Rockhamptons, which are like a northern. And those lineages have been kept pure. And then I think there's a couple people that might have a few other things that are sort of like under the radar, hush hush, not really big out there. But for the most part, we don't have a ton of like localities outside of that.
Really? So like
Other than,
everything's already been kind of crossed into each other?
yeah, I mean, so here in the States, we could find lineages of jungles that are pretty much well preserved old school lineages of pure jungles. You can find jungles that might have a question mark or a missing piece of information in there, or
So a
an
jungle
undocumented
type.
animal. Yeah, something where like one particular animal in the family tree was a stunning animal at a reptile show that was just labeled jungle by some guy who just did it on the side, and like that was all the information that was preserved. um, but it doesn't necessarily mean impure or not. That's the thing, though, because like unless you collected these animals off the ground in Australia and then worked it all the way through, everything's up for debate. But setting that
Sounds
aside,
familiar.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it sounds familiar, and I know a lot of
We have a
people
lot
that.
of similarities in these
Yeah.
two
w-
worlds of ours.
Well, I know in the Retic world, there's actually someone there. There was a post that was made on the Retic Nation, and someone made a comment that, Retics are soon going to end up being like uh, carpets, in the sense that everyone's just going to like cross localities, not keep track and all that stuff. And I think the damage of that has mostly already been done. I still think that,
Hmm.
I think that we still there. I think there's quite a few of us that like localities enough to make sure that we can separate them. Now, I'm talking about from all localities, like the Superdorf localities.
Hmm.
That's a different story. I'm still a big
Yeah.
believer, whether it's Kalatoa, Karampa, Karumpa, or Madu.
Hmm.
Damn it, this always happens. Every time I do a finger gesture, balloons come up. Son of a bitch.
It's
I need to get
we
I
had
need
a
to
thing with Lucas over the last year and a half where he would make shapes on the camera, and now it's his
now,
effects.
yeah, now it's the effects,
Oh,
but
that's kind of cool.
yeah. I still think those four localities, right? Karumpa, Karampa, Kalatoa, I think they're all the same subspecies that obviously there's not a lot of science and people going out and studying retics over in these tiny islands in Indonesia, but in reality, they're the same snakes. Their islands are literally a rock skip away.
Hmm.
But I definitely think the Retic community has enough people that are focusing on like Coyote or Solayer or Sulawesi, or I don't think we're gonna go out there and start taking Sulawesis to Solayers and then people are just gonna call them Sulawesis, right? Like
Right.
I think we've fortunately got past that part, but yeah, just it sounds a lot like, I mean, there's a lot of similarities with the locality stuff between the two, and I'm wondering
Yeah,
if
and you can't import either.
no, that's yeah, exactly, for both.
Yep.
Um, so do you think that the like cross locale, like with Morelia and with carpet pythons, maybe I'm not correct here, but they have gone through multiple subspecies classifications and changes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I, I wonder if it has to like, we didn't, if they all of a sudden change them when, maybe a couple of localities were the same and now they're not, now we have a mutt, whereas before it wasn't. But I want to get your opinion on this because research in science here in the US, I believe, my opinion is it's going down the shitter. Everything is financially driven. There's very little science that's like truly being done. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast episode where, scientists, she left academia because they were wanting her to do these ridiculous things, and now she's an independent researcher, which kudos to her, because not a lot of people, being an independent researcher, you go broke, like unless you
Yeah.
write like books. And so, do you think that there's any like money influence, like for people to do these like sub classifications and like reclassify, like, or is this true? Like, do you think the differences currently right now should actually reflect the subspecies, or do you think that there's maybe a little bit of like, well, they're giving us money to do this, so we have to come up with something?
I think there's a little bit of both, unfortunately and fortunately. I've actually recently been listening to Forrest Galante on his Wild Times podcast, and every once in a while he'll get on a rant about some of that stuff. And one that stood out to me was very similar to that. A lot of the new research going on and finding these new subspecies are these new folks to the scientific community trying to attach their name to
They
something
want
new
clout.
and groundbreaking, and
Yeah.
that's all it is. Like I do believe in a subspecies concept to a degree, but like some of the stuff they said with the children's pythons and the antaresia all being the same thing, I was like, you're blind and you've never left your office. Go burn that paper and shut up. I don't even have to have ever visited the continent of Australia to know that that's a bunch of malarkey.
Yeah.
I've
That
bred it.
a
I've
pygmy
bred
and children are
antaresia.
different.
I mean, they're all different. I've seen
Yeah.
literally all of them in front of me, and not one looks the same. Like even morphologically, there's subtle difference. Look at the pre and post ocular scales. Look at where their nasal opening is positioned in the scute on their nose. Like look at literally every mite. Nothing. They're all different. All different. They occupy different little biomes and niches. And yeah, there might be some overlap, but like if they were all the same, why would we have so much variation in something that's all the same?
So is that happening in the carpet python world?
The carpet python world, I feel, fortunately, has made changes for the right reasons and for pure correction in science. I think that's an uneducated sort of inference based on the last 10 years of me paying attention to it. The people involved, I think their motivations and their research and their work is very genuine and doesn't come from financial ulterior motives like Dr. Warren Booth and the folks over at RGI that do a lot of this DNA sequencing. Yeah, it is their business, but like it's also imperative for them to be authentic and transparent in everything they do. So I think that's the ultimate way for any sort of uh, endeavor like that to have merit and respect is it to be completely transparent, and be done from a scientific method with all the research possible. And snake research is not easy because they are very elusive for a good reason in the wild. So,
Right. They
um,
survived this long.
yeah. So I was impressed with a lot of the DNA analysis and work that was done, and and I respect the changes made, and I mean, who am I to say that they're wrong or, I know differently. They're all the folks that I've been learning from the last, 10 years or so. And I grew up with the first arrangement of Morelia, the first complete carpet python, so to speak. Have both books and learned under the original, names. Like I grew up calling Papuans IJs, and I don't do
Yeah,
that
like
anymore because I
wait,
feel like that's
Aaron
more politically correct.
Aaron Jaya is not a thing anymore.
I mean, I don't think so. To
Because
me,
when I had my coastal, I was looking at other carpets because I liked them, and I was like, oh, these are much more fun than my ball pythons here. And again, I was like a teenager at the time, and Irian Jaya was one that I was just eyeing and loved.
so the snakes themselves are still there, and
Well,
you'll
yeah,
still
of
see
course.
plenty of people label them as that. Like Morph Market still calls it that, I
No, they
think.
just blew up the area when they decided to get rid of that name, and just all the snakes are gone.
Yeah. To me, I would think that if I was a native Papuan, uh, resident there, if Irian Jaya, that term was like an old defunct government related name or something from decades before, and everyone was now using Papua, I feel like that would be the more respectful term. Now, I don't know if I'm right in that. So yeah, I get IJ is easier to write and say, and it's quick, but I don't know. Maybe I'm too nerdy in that aspect.
So, is there, there's plenty of drama in the Rita community when it comes to localities and crossing things. Do you find that to be the same in the carpet python? Like, are there like strict people that like will you know just put you on blast if you take two different subspecies together? Because I know they could breed together, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you could breed any Morelia to
any
one
carpet,
another,
right?
and that's including chondros and roughies. They'll all breed. They're all
I'm
that
not a
similar.
I won't do hybrid pairings. I love looking at them, and man,
Sure.
a freaking carpondro is one of the coolest creatures
Beautiful
to ever
snake.
exist.
Undeniable. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's okay if it's not for you and you don't want to do that, but it's also okay to acknowledge that it's a beautiful snake. Like, let's
Oh
be
yeah,
real. That's
for
not,
sure.
there's no risk of that getting back into the wild and messing up
Right.
a native gene pool, right? Which is ultimately what everyone's concern is about losing something in its natural state for good and
Yeah.
potentially compromising its existence and making everything skeptical.
Yeah.
But
We're all playing
ultimately,
little
that's how it
mini
goes.
scientists in our garages in our houses.
Right.
We're just trying to create stuff.
Well,
Right. And unless
I
you,
think the only example I've seen of it being a problem, as far as I'm aware, is like the Retic Timor cross, just because they can look
right.
so similar that the
They're
person.
almost the same snake, like
I've heard
morphologically
of
in the head.
Well,
well,
I
I've
mean,
heard of a snake being sold as a Retic, but it was a hybrid.
Superdorf retake, but it was a hybrid, and then
Yeah.
but the thing is I bet that happens in the wild. They cross.
I mean, natural hybrids are a thing. Look at, Gabinos.
Well, and
Exactly.
that's what I was going to ask about the Antaresia and the children's pythons. Do you think there's any of that happening naturally?
Um, I, I, I wouldn't be the best person to ask that. I would have to refresh my geographic understanding of the gene
Okay.
flow of the various populations.
That's not what we're here to talk about anyway.
I think they might be isolated enough where it is distinct regionally because Australia does have a lot of these corridors and natural barriers that prevent gene flow, and that's why we see a lot of
Yeah,
even within Morelia the
the
isolation.
geography of Australia provides plenty of different barriers.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll like there's pockets of imbricata that are isolated. The Brettles are on an island within an island. There's no gene flow into
I mean,
or out of.
look at the rough scales even.
Yeah, yeah, the Northern Territory up there, the Kimberley, that's really
Yeah.
harsh terrain. I mean, it was only recently that roughies were even documented out there just because it was nearly inaccessible before, helicopters could drop you in and
Right.
whatnot. So, yeah, absolutely.
So
To the
drama
controversy thing,
in the carpet python,
yeah,
like with mixing localities.
I would say it was at a fever pitch probably 10 years ago, and it was at its highest then, and it's just continually declined, I think, as more people have gotten into it, more people have gotten tired of arguing and fighting, and then the research has changed a little bit recently. And I think, people have just kind of calmed down a little bit more, myself included, because I'm absolutely guilty of being sort of like an agro purist initially, because that was kind of how I came up. And then I sort of learned through some misunderstandings and what I was I was misled on how to interpret things, and I didn't understand genetics well. And I realized I had a couple crosses, but I was like determined to see these projects through. So I did that, and it kind of forced me to reevaluate, like, a beautiful snake is a beautiful snake. There's a time and a place for all these things. We're not misrepresenting what they are, so we can kind of avoid some of these concerns. But it was still a very valid concern. I just, after I think 10 years of everybody kind of being up in arms about it, I think everybody's just gotten tired of bitching about it. And so you have two
Oh,
camps, and both are accepted. You
okay,
have
cool.
you have the people that like to keep stuff pure and only do like straight coastal projects, only do straight Brettles projects, etc. And then you have folks that uh, cross them, but the crossing comes with an end goal in mind, like a really neat, usually morph driven combination of sorts. It's not just I'm breeding a Brettles to
I
a
have
coastal
this and I have
because.
that, so let's do it. They're typically trying to achieve some, phenotypic polygenic expression that they're trying to aim for.
Yeah, you're either stacking a couple genes or making a wacky jag or something fun. Um,
A wacky
so
jag.
I think it's really accepted, especially because Nick Mutton has been sort of like the vocal driving force for it in the United States, and he's very much a purist. But even he's
Yeah.
lightened up over the years on some of this, because at the end of the day, you can trace lineage only so far back, because
Yeah.
at a certain point it was either smuggled or there just isn't records. And so you kind of have to take things on faith, even in the best scenario. And so I think a lot of that has kind of come to light, and people just lighten up a little bit more. And I think seeing everybody else being a little bit more accepting of, like, hey, a cool snake's a cool snake. It's all good. I think everyone's kind of lightened up a little bit.
Hopefully we get there in the retic world. And yeah, Nick Mutton's a cool dude. I've talked to him in the past about retics, and he got a pair of Solayers from me that um he reached out about dwarf. So I'm excited for him to get his hands on them, because this clutch looks insane.
Yeah, he and Ryan definitely are not just specialists in one thing. They are true snake aficionados. I have hesitate to even pigeonhole them in just python aficionados, even though that's what they specialize in. They also love their boas and bluebirds and lizards, and Ryan loves turtles, if you didn't know. So, like, it's pretty, they're eclectic, very eclectic, intelligent individuals. So yeah.
So I'm gonna have Nathan bring up your Instagram, and whenever Nathan wants and he sees an awesome carpet python, I'm gonna have him kind of just address, and I want you to talk a little bit about like what it is, how old it is, all that good stuff, and then as he's like after this first one, as he's going through other ones, what I would like for you to do, Riley, we're gonna kind of multitask here, is I would love if you could go into your like not condense like 2 minutes, but I want you to go into your beginner's guide on carpet pythons. Are they, what level of keeping are they? What temperatures do they need? What sizes do they get? What morphs are there? Like, I want you to give a beginner's care and info guide on them.
Cool.
So, real quick, what the hell is that?
That is a really, really exciting animal that I picked up as, I think, maybe 6, 7 month old hatchling. That is a striped jungle that was produced from pairing a German jungle line animal to a highlighter line jungle animal, both selectively bred, lines for their bright yellows, clean blacks, over the years. Not ever necessarily labeled pure by most people, but you can't necessarily call them impure. It's just all
They
speculated,
look
like
like a
we've been talking
jungle.
about. It's it's creme de la creme, regardless. And that girl happened to be a nice striped animal from the clutch that Jeff Clark produced and let get away. I don't think he realized what that girl was.
That's the coolest jungle I've ever seen. And
That,
once you said
Yeah.
it came from some German lines, it must be their history in eugenics.
Yeah, the one.
That
Sorry.
was good.
I feel
That
like
was nice.
I can.
That
I
was
feel like I
good.
can always drop too soon for that. But oh man,
Yeah, the German line stuff in carpets is German jungles is one of those like well known, very selectively bred for top quality stuff. So
that
Lucas,
was
I get a
good.
pass on this. I'm half of my family's Jewish.
No, not dude. There's no. That's it's comedy at its finest, man. I'm so happy that you
I
said
just saw
that.
you facepalm, and I'm just like, oh.
No, I'm laughing.
so
Uh,
so that girl there is I think she's going on 3 years old right now. So what is it? It's 2024 now. So yeah, she's a 21 hatch animal. I took that photo while cleaning a few days ago, so it's relatively current. And she takes, medium rats for me every 2, 3 weeks, depending time of year and what I'm doing, unless it's winter. And then right now she's not eating at all because I'm a mean snake keeper like that. Um, but for the most part, from baby to adult, with my carpet pythons, I've run a very similar husbandry routine that I sort of based off of what I grew up learning as sort of standard middle of the road basic python husbandry, which is a hot
it,
spot
it is it,
between.
it is pretty basic. Like most pythons across the world will survive in the same temperature range.
Yeah, and carpets have been excellent at showing what we in the Morelia community like to term resilience to keeper error. And it's not so much keeper error; it's variation in husbandry, in my opinion. Because you can have a light go out and be like, I don't have time to replace it for a day or two, and they're fine. You skip a couple weeks on food, they're fine. All these things are very resilient and hardy, but regardless, ideally, a hot spot between 84, 88 is great. Give or take a couple degrees, depending on how the ambient air temperature goes. And then, the cool end of that thermal gradient can go as low as 70 degrees pretty much year round. And they're kind of fine with it, especially if they can warm up during the day. You get a lot more activity with them when you give them that gradient because it kind of forces them to go back and forth. Um,
Really, I noticed a difference with my retics. So
yeah,
I used to keep on gradient, and when I used to keep on gradient, they were either plopped on the cold side or plopped on the hot side, and then typically at nighttime with all retics, if you look at your camera at nighttime, they're cruising all over the place.
doing all over. Yeah.
Yeah, but since I switched over to just strictly ambient, not a single hotspot exists in my garage. Um, they're way more active. Like,
Interesting.
and I guess my theory on it and kind of my observation just from observing is that thermoregulation requires them to utilize energy in order to do that. And while they are thermoregulating, they're needing to sit on those cooler or hotter sides in order to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to. When you keep an ambient and the ambient just has that, just the increase, the hot point of the day, and then the decrease, they don't have to work and do that unless they're digesting and heating their body up more naturally, or they're gravid and heating up more naturally. So I think that gives them the opportunity to actually be more active all over the enclosure.
Hmm.
Just a
That's
theory.
really that's really interesting because I can totally see carpets adapting to that style of husbandry without skipping a beat. No
Don't
problem.
tell me that because I'll as soon as we hang up, I'll buy one.
You
Don't
know,
tell me that.
who was it?
Brian Young has bred carpets, right? And he keeps everything in freaking ambient.
Yeah, and then was it the rodent barn or the bean farm? One of those
Bean farm.
bean farm, and then they did everything on ambient, and they bred like ring pythons and all these other things. And yeah,
Yeah.
I do think if you had the climate for it, or you had a room where you could manage it like that, you would have no problem because they're bulletproof, man. They're so resilient animals, and on the hottest days, when it's like 110 degrees outside, my snake room's like 85, ambient. they're usually just sprawled in the middle of the cage. They're just kind of like, this is all right. We'll go to the cool side, maybe sit by the water bowl, but like
Right.
they're tough. And then when it's cold, they're out, man. Like I've got my Brettles at the shop right now because I'm cooling them down deep cold. They're hitting like high 40s, low 50s. But if I pull them out, they're moving, they're tongue flicking. They're cold as ice to the
Holy
touch, but they're
shit! That
and I
cold?
wouldn't I bet you they would take a meal if I offered them right now
That
too.
cold?
Yeah, they hit 49 degrees a couple nights ago.
Oh,
Oh, dude, that is bulletproof.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
As long as they can warm up for a few hours during the day, I've got them both with overhead heat lamps in the shop.
Those are Texas winter storm power outage proof animals.
I
Yeah.
look at any of the species out here in Utah, and I mean, it doesn't surprise me all that much.
Holy
Yeah,
shit.
they would be fine.
Damn.
They're nuts, man. They get real dark and you can feel it. They're cold, but they'll still come out and tongue flick, and they'll go and thermoregulate and they go hide. Like the lights only come on for I think maybe 7.5 hours,
Hold on,
and
real
they
quick
won't even use it all the way.
before Nathan moves on, go back to that Darwin's albino and how rare are these?
Not as rare as you think.
Really? So that dude, that snake is. So I was gonna say before with the jungle that we were looking at,
Mhm.
the like one main feature that I like about the appearance of carpets over, there's a couple that I like a little bit more of the appearance on carpets as opposed to retics, but one of them is like the thick, like just like black. Like in retics,
Yes.
we don't have black. Like we don't have
So
black like you do in carpets.
it's really easy to look at a jungle carpet python and be like, man, the yellow is insane. But if you don't have good black, the yellow doesn't show up.
Yeah, you
Right.
need the contrast.
So it's really easy to produce jungle carpets with tons of yellow and yellow tipping, and it looks amazing, but you don't see much black. And then when you see one with like inky jet black, like velvety, like somebody literally poured like motor oil on it, it doesn't matter how much yellow is on there and what caliber it is, that thing is hot because
Yeah.
the contrast is just that much greater.
So just to recap, hotspots 84 to 88, depending on the ambient of the room, and typically a cool down into the 70s, but even some of them you say you can drop down to even more. As
Yep.
as Nathan's pulling up another picture, let me ask you this. Are you um what size range can you expect a jungle carpet to get, and if you need to break it down to like the different subspecies, whatever, just for people to get an idea, like, is this snake for me? How big is this snake going to get?
Sure. Um, I can kind of give you some averages. I would say average across the board of species and genders is between 5 and 7 feet. And then if you want to split hairs more, males are going to be on the smaller end, um, with some exceptions. The exceptions being that sometimes males are just about the same size as females if you feed them the same.
Mhm.
And that would be in like, you can have jungles where they're the same size. Popwin's definitely the same size. But on the bigger end, in terms of length, the top three would be a female Brettles python can get close to 8 feet. Coastal females have been known to get 7+ feet if fed appropriately, and
You know,
and
it's
in and
it's funny, when I bought that coastal at the pet store, it had on there 12 to 13 feet. It,
yeah, nah. So I made a video that was like how big do carpet pythons really get, and it's one of my most frequently viewed videos to this day. It just is in circulation, and every once in a while I'll get an Aussie person hopping on there that's like, well, what about this? I found a 3.2 meter, and I'm like, no, you're right, you're totally right. There are some 10 footers out there because I kind of made it, this thing is like they don't hit 10 feet. I've never even seen one beyond 8 feet, and that is true. I've never seen one more than 8 feet in person. I have seen a photo of my friend Scott Iper who caught a big 3.1 meter southern coastal with like a freaking tree kangaroo in its belly. Thing was massive. Its head was as big as my hand, right? Big animal. So some of them do get big, and every once in a while you'll see a video. There was a viral video going around earlier last year of a snake going off of this roof trellis into some trees, and
I
it looked
remember
like a
that.
scrub python with how big it was, but it was a coastal from what I could tell. So you
There
get
was
those old
someone
freak
a
animals.
few years ago, some YouTube creator. I wish I remembered who, but went out to Australia and they found a pretty big carpet as well.
So
Wish
yeah,
I
man, some
knew
of
who that was.
those tough animals, they're resilient, man. And if they can, live 15 years, they're gonna get freaking huge out there because they're gonna eat some massive stuff, regardless of which subspecies or whatever you're talking about. These things can eat like way massive meals. I mean, you see the
Love that.
videos from sunsign snake catchers where the thing's hanging from a tree for 12 hours and finally eats a tree possum or whatever. Like, there's just, you could stuff these things. Obviously, you can also shorten their lifespan by overfeeding them like anything else. But um, yeah, man, they're wicked. That's a very special jungle to me.
That's an insane
How could it
animal.
not be looking like that?
Yeah, and she has the
That's like
backstory to
that's like a
boot.
jungle that wants to be a diamond.
Yeah, so she's got that very unique sort of floret sort of pattern, and it definitely translates into her offspring. And I'm hoping to see
Oh,
what it
sweet.
does paired this year with a banded male.
Ooh,
I paired her with a striped male 2 years ago and got ocelots. Who knew? Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, so but she is actually a full blood sibling, same clutch, same year, and everything to the very first jungle carpet that I bought, my first sort of big purchase into Morelia from Todd Dyer from one of the SoCal shows at the Psychotic Exotics booth. He's been a mentor for me for years. At that point, I had already, had a lot of time in his ear, just learning as much as I could. And I bought a female from him, raised her up, and she ended up, producing my founding striped animals and having a couple clutches. I think I bred her 3 times. Um, but I also got her in that era where I didn't know how to back off the feeding and kind of go easy, and I pushed her to about an 8 foot size. And one day I think she had some sort of internal organ failure, and she passed away in the enclosure
Man.
year
well,
and
it's
a half
cool to
ago,
have this. It's
2 years
cool to have
ago.
this animal as a like full circle moment back. You know,
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
I was pretty torn up about losing that animal, and I
oh, I'm
reached out
sure.
to Todd, and I was just miserable. I was like, dude, I fucked up. Like, I think I killed her. I think all these years of not knowing better about feeding regimens and things, I think it just kind of caught up with her and this and that. And I was just like, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, and then, unbeknownst to me, my wife went, and was messaging him behind my back, trying to see if he could find, or she could find, an equivalent female, and at that same time, Todd was like, well, I have this girl, I'll just send her to you. So,
That's awesome. See,
Wow.
and that
dude,
was only a
power
few
couple
months
right there.
before,
Power couple right there.
Psychotic Exotics disbanded. Yeah, she's amazing. She's made some cool artwork for me. I had a very sentimental tiger jag that Todd introduced me to when I first saw his warehouse, and she bit me in the forehead. And I was
Nice.
like, well, I need to have this snake. And so he's like, okay. And
I,
she
oh,
passed away, so my wife made a piece of art with her. So yeah, man, like, carpets are in my blood.
I love it. And for those of you that haven't talked to Riley, don't know Riley, and we probably won't spend too much time talking about this, but Riley gets bit by just about everything. He's got stitches and wounds and scars from just about everything. But I mean, I guess that's what
Yep.
happens when you work with reptiles as much as you do, as many animals as you do, the exposure that you get them for as long as you do it. But what the heck is that animal, dude?
That is another
A super
very
zebra.
proud moment of mine, in
I didn't know
so many ways.
zebras. I didn't know zebras had a super form.
Yep, yep. So the homozygous form of that genetic expression goes far left field. And instead, it takes a super busy, crazy, busy, hectic pattern and just goes delete, and that's what you
Jeez.
get. Um, the other side of it, though, and I believe it's probably related to some weakness in the gene, and probably also related to some inbreeding, is that the super zebra has a propensity to produce an animal with a slightly kinked tail, and it could be as simple as like a little knuckle, or a 90-degree with a nub fold on the end that you gotta lance off, because otherwise every shed it will have issues. And I've experienced the spectrum of them. I've produced 5 or 6 of them over the last few years. And this girl is a 4, actually she'll be 5 this year, a 5-year-old female of mine. And it was a goal of mine to get zebras and produce my own super zebras. And in 2019, I produced a pair of them exactly, and kept them. And so not only did I, check that uh, long aimed for, goal off my list, but I did it in an unexpected fashion with this female because she has jet black eyes, which is not a thing with the super zebra trait. It's just not, like, they have dark eyes, but not like jet black. And then she's got a couple weird paradox spots that you can see, some light patches, and she has a
Yeah.
perfect tail, no kink in her tail.
I was gonna say, you
So,
see the tip of the tail. It doesn't
Looks
look like
fine.
it got lanced off.
Dude, that's huge.
nope.
That's awesome.
But then,
So
to the same note, her sibling male brother that I have, he had the whole knuckle, and I had to lance off a nub, and his eyes are dark but not jet black. So it's like both spectrum right
okay. Now, okay, so we talked about size. So we're generally speaking on the larger end of the scale, 7 to 9 feet roughly. And 9 feet is still like very, very, very large. But you know,
there. Yeah,
you're
like a super old diamond, or a really massive Brettles python, or maybe a huge southern coastal. But like,
okay.
yeah, that's 1 in a million. You're looking at most females 7 feet and under.
Okay, cool. That's really that's a manageable size. So we've covered temperature, we've covered their size, humidity. What are their needs requirements? Are they hypersensitive to over humidity, to less humidity? Are they pretty sturdy along? It sounds like if they can get down to 40.
Yeah, they're pretty resilient, man. It's rare to get a bad shed out of a carpet. Up here in Sacramento, we get rather dry
Dude,
winters
those
and
coastals are
summers.
so nice.
Yeah, man,
Sorry,
they've grown
sorry.
on me. Every time I produce more, I'm like, I get why people don't love these. These are sick.
So
Um,
wait, people don't love coastals as much? Is that like
they're not
is
they're
that
not
the
the
middle
black and yellow
child?
flashy jungles. Yeah, yeah, they're
That's
not
the
as
middle
pretty as
child.
most people see a jungle, and that's what they remember first, right? They don't
Of
remember the
Yeah,
course.
rest because it's
yeah.
not
Of
black and
course.
yellow. So
That's
you
the
you got to
first
kind
thing.
of ease them into that, right? And so
Hmm.
most coastals without morphs are more of the natural earthy tones, buckskins, tans, browns,
I love
sort of
that
in
though,
that
the
realm.
Yeah,
chocolatey.
me too.
But you
Um,
can really get crazy with coastals, man. For whatever reason, just they seem to have a huge propensity for phenotypic variation.
so I was a dig and I interrupted you again. So you said the humidity around you is in the 40s.
At best. Like right now, because it's raining, it's like up in the 60s, and I'm like, holy crap, I've never seen this up here. But oftentimes our humidity is in the teens. And so even with really low humidity here, just a water bowl and low ventilation in an enclosure, if you're raising a baby in a rack, like low ventilation, as long as it's not stagnant air, of course. And usually just a decent sized water bowl is enough. They tend to get it all off. You might get a little bit on the tail that you just kind of flake off, but and I don't spray or mist or anything. I will run a humidifier in my room 3/4 of the
Can
year,
can
not
they
really during the winter.
can they tolerate 60-70% humidity?
Heck yeah, jungles
Okay,
love it. Papuans love it. Papuans will
nice.
soak, man. They're the
Also,
only snakes that will randomly, for no rhyme or reason, you'll have a whole clutch and like 2 will just be habitual soakers.
love
No
that.
reason.
Also, I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, HeliGuy Serpent, because I'm pretty sure that those were HeliGuy Serpent perches I saw them on.
Yes, they were. Yes,
Yep.
they were.
Yep.
Yeah, he makes
Awesome.
some cool stuff. We've tinkered with all sorts of stuff over the last few years. I've had everything
He,
from like the little T perch that just sticks on the wall to the whole inserts to you name it. Sky
yeah,
hives.
he sent some of the latchable ones, the ones you can
Yeah,
configure,
those
and
are really cool.
those are cool.
Yeah.
Now, so they're pretty humidity tolerant across the board.
Yep.
Now pay attention to the wording here. What is the carpet python industry standard that is acceptable for cage size?
4 by 2 by 2.
4 by 2 by 2, and that's for any female 7 foot or less, and any really most snakes, unless you have one of those monsters.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you got a freak of nature that's like a over 8 footer, 9 footer, or something that you fed rabbits to, and for some reason hasn't died before its sixth birthday. Um, yeah, 4x2x2 is great, and in fact, I would say like if I was setting up a reptile room from scratch and had spare no expense sort of a thing, ideally I would put all females in 4x2x2s, with the exception of poplin carpets because they're a little bit smaller, but it would come down to the individual, I think, because I do have some that are good size, and a 4x2x2 would be comfortable. But males, 3 foot enclosures, plenty. I keep my males very small, and it's not like a I don't feed them and I starve them. I feed them, just as frequently as other snakes. I just don't push them onto huge meals. And the other thing too is I find when I give my carpets the winter off, because I'll do that for babies all the way through adults from end of October to February, whatever, whenever I decide beginning and middle of February, they don't get a meal unless it's like a struggling baby that, needs help. Um,
Okay, fair.
and so what that does is it kind of puts them on pace for a slow but steady growth. And then, you know, if I'm feeding holdbacks to, this female is eventually going to breed. She's obviously going to get bigger meals than the male. She needs that more. I've had males breed at a year and a half old and like under 300 grams,
Awesome.
like little
Uh,
twigs.
so next thing is what can like someone who gets a young, hatchling, established hatchling, 3-4 months, and you send them that animal, what are you wanting them to keep that animal in, and what are they like, what should people expect as far as their behaviors and defensive or nippiness, and in general, are adults also defensive or prone to biting? Do they need to be pulled out or tapped with a hook like retics do? Like, go, I guess start with the beginning part on what do you want them to house them in when they get a baby, and then what kind of behaviors to expect as a baby all the way to adulthood.
So, depending on if they already have snakes and already have a system in place, or if this is like sort of a first time or a pet, either put it into a similar equivalent baby rack like it's raised up in. I raise my babies in 6 quart tubs. So if you have something like that already going for an existing Python system, slot it right into there, and it'll make the transition nice and easy. I always recommend quarantining, even for myself. I'm human, so just do your due diligence. Always be safe. Always quarantine. Always do what you can if you can. Um, but yeah, so either a 6 quart tub or a shoebox or something small. But I've also had folks who are not into the rack game, and they'll start them out in the small exoterras. And if they do that, what I say is just make sure you have a couple hides and you fill in the open volume of space, whether it's like a dead branch with a bunch of little sticks everywhere that kind of just adds visual barriers, or you crumple up a bunch of butcher paper and make like a wadded ball of paper, or have fake whatever you have to do to provide visual barriers if you're going to put a snake in like an exoterra, one of the like medium lows or small lows or the nanos. Just make sure they feel hidden and snug and kind of caved in a bit, because they're going to come from my system in an enclosed sort of cave in this rack that is dark and secure, and they feel safe. And it's going to be a new transition, so you want to make that as seamless as possible. And you can do it in PVC, you can do it in glass tanks, you can do it in whatever. If you just know what they're stressed by, which is vulnerability, then you can adjust and adapt regardless of your system. I'm very confident in that, especially if I'm sending an animal that's established and eating. All you have to do is just get it into your routine, and it
Just make
might
sure
not
it feels
eat
safe.
right away. Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. Even if you have to make that enclosure look ugly because
Yeah.
it's not fancy and function, like do it for a week or two, and I guarantee you, once you get that first meal in it, you'll get over the hump. So then, what I like to tell people is, don't handle it first. Get it settled in, and make sure it takes a meal for you, whether that's that night or a week later, whatever you want to do. I don't care, but don't start handling it and putting it through new scenarios until you know it's eating and settled in. Eating in there is its first sign that it's accepted its new arrangement and settings, right? then you're usually off to the races. It's upgrade as much as you want to as they grow. There's no such thing as too big of an enclosure for a carpet python. If you want to have a vertically oriented enclosure or terrestrial, that's fine. Just heat appropriately.
They're
Pay
semi-arboreal,
attention.
right?
They'll climb it if you give them, and they'll stay on the ground if you don't provide it, and they'll use whatever. They're adaptable as can be. They will thrive. But yeah, if you give them a perch and you put their heat up top, they won't touch the floor unless they go down for a drink, go to the bathroom, shed, something like that. They love climbing, especially babies.
How nippy are they?
So
Like, I mean, even adults. I mean, are carpet pythons an animal that you got to worry about biting you, or like?
I
Don't
mean,
get me wrong. Like for most people listening, any like hatchling snake is likely to be scared of this monster that we are.
sure,
It might,
yeah.
nip, it might bite until they realize that we're not going to hurt it. But generally speaking, what is a carpet python's disposition?
Honestly, a lot better than the reputation precedes, and I feel like it's gotten better over time with, better multiple generations further and people who understand how to handle them right. And if I'm being completely honest, every import, every Papuan import farm hatched animal that I've gotten has been an absolute doll, a sweetheart. I've never had a mean one, from baby to adult. In fact, what's odd is I'll breed farm hatched or captive bred Papuans that are sweethearts, and the babies are just demons. Just those Papuan carpets, just little F1s or captive bred for whatever reason, they just hit the ground mad. Um, but if you're just doing that once a week, like feed, clean, change water sort of thing, just kind of letting them be, they grow out of it like anything else.
Hmm.
But just as much as like bearded dragons have crazy personality, so do these. So I've got a few that admittedly have a mean streak in them. I'd say it's probably 1 in 15 that is like that. That is a challenge to break of that. That being said, I bought my female zebra at already a year and a half, maybe 2 years old, and I nicknamed her Palm Fighter before I kind of had a feel for her because she literally like would just turn from a dead still and just open mouth and hit me in the palm wide open, all rows of teeth in the palm, two separate times, and it hurt and it really sucked, and I was like not down with that, and so I made a point to just handle her, and now I don't even use a hook with her. So to that tune, I would say the majority of my carpet pythons I don't use a hook with, unless I've got food thawing or it's after like 6:30. After 6:30 and lights out, I don't even change waters,
So
dude.
they're
Those
like a
things are
chondro.
heat-seeking missiles. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can kind of get away with it with some of them. You kind of have your ones that are docile and would never do that. But even then, at night, you just want to make sure they're like not actively cruising right by the water because you're a heat signature at night. You're fair game. I don't care how well they know you. So yeah, like if I come home late and I'm like, dang it, I wanted to get cleaning done and the lights are out in the snake room, it's like, well, that's a tomorrow problem because
Yeah,
I am not dealing with that. I
makes
tried that
sense.
enough times to know that, pushing off water cleaning tonight is a good way to just bleed all over the place. So yeah.
Cool.
They they're defensive, I would say.
They're
They're not
nervous.
aggressive. They're nervous, and at night they have very significant food drive.
Yeah.
I spend enough time spot cleaning babies and just like picking them up by hand and not using a hook and letting them freak out or poop or bite or whatever. See, that's why I'm like, that's probably why I get bit so much, is because I'm habituated to every year for the last 9, 10 years raising up babies that's all they know how to do. And I just kind of let them do it. And then they either grow out of it or they don't. And I just kind of let it ride. And majority of the time, by the time they go off to a customer, they've already figured out that I'm not there to hurt them. They've had some experiences that are at least neutral in their memory bank of sort of positive or negative experiences, and I just try to
Yeah.
let them experience it. If they've got to sit in my hand and just nail me like 5 times before they stop and realize it, and we've got to do that a couple weeks, like so be it.
I'm
Yeah,
sure when they're
you have to
babies,
be
it doesn't
willing
hurt.
to. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, as babies, it's minimal. You almost don't feel it. So
And that's the perfect time to, you know, be putting in that time to
Yeah.
yeah,
desensitize and habituate that animal.
yeah,
We were pulling up some of your animals and obviously wanted to share your YouTube channel. But
appreciate
that banner that you have, can you tell me a little bit more about that animal?
it. Yeah, so that is my male Brettles Python when he was about 2.5, 3 years old. That's really when a lot of carpets color just shines, man. That two to
Dude,
three
that
year
thing is
window.
popping.
And that particular photograph was taken about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. A buddy of mine at the time, he and I were very, very obsessed with shooting on black glass with strobes and a backdrop. And so he had this like $400 piece of black glass, and he would drive it up from the Bay Area, and we'd literally deconstruct my entire kitchen and set up a photo studio in there every couple weeks,
That's
and
That's
awesome.
just
awesome.
spend the day taking photos on that piece of glass, and just kind of learning how to work with the camera and how the light bounces affects imagery, and learning about photoshopping tiny little pixels of hairs off of everything, 'cause that's so
Right,
much
dude. That's
fun.
the big part with the black background, dude. That
Yes,
even
you
in
see every
glasses,
speck,
glass is even
every.
more so than just like the black background you put like in a light box. So I could imagine.
Yeah,
I
yeah, there's a
wanted to,
reason why I don't do that anymore.
right. I wanted to say something about your YouTube page. If you guys are listeners to the Retake Lounge, and even if like carpet pythons isn't your bread and butter, he's got so many other animals. Riley, I mean this like sincerely and genuinely. You have for me, one of the best YouTube channels out there, because you don't get fancy with it, you don't showboat, you don't do a bunch of things, but your videos are so damn educational and provide so much information on multiple species, and you're just real to the camera. And you're not doing it in a way that's misrepresenting the love and passion that we have. Like some people, they like to do this thing in front of their snake's face, and or free handle venomous snakes, right? um so I can go into the downfall of the venomous community here probably in the next few years because of all the stupid stuff that's happening, but I just wanted to give you a kudos. I saw that you got a good subscriber base, but that number needs to be tripled at least.
I
um
appreciate that.
you got a great channel. And what's awesome about your videos too is they're short, they're sweet. It's like the good classic YouTube days, right? Where videos are 7 to 15 minutes long of good snake content and information. It's just a good channel.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
realistic expectations of, like, you know, what reptile keeping is like, what keeping Morelia is like. It's great. I believe I was introduced to you, and maybe even Lucas too, through Brian Cusco back
Yeah.
2019, 2020, when he was doing some of those pandemic streams, when everyone was locked down
Yeah,
and kind of getting together.
I think that's where I did first meet him. um
yeah, I
yeah,
remember those.
but yeah,
Seems so far back. Gosh.
I know, right?
like
Yeah,
it is,
wow.
but it
It's kind of
isn't, but
nice.
it also
Right.
is. It's kind
It's
of
like a
crazy just
separate
how time
era
is.
of our existence.
Dude,
Hmm.
I like literally, like I think by the time that we're all like in our 50s, we will have compartmentalized COVID time, and it was a really weird
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
But before we close out, Riley, any other things that you feel like you want to share about carpets for people that are, again, we're a retic based community, so speaking to people that don't know too much about carpets, or in general anything else that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I have one more question as well.
Cool.
Yeah. If you're looking to find your species and you haven't found it yet, give them a shot, because without inputting my bias in there too much, they kind of are like a middle of the road size, temperament, demeanor snake. I wouldn't say they're necessarily fresh into snake beginners, but I've also set fresh into snake beginners up with them, and they're doing great. Um, they're not necessarily difficult to keep or understand, but they can present a few challenges behaviorally if you get one that you're not super handleable with, or just maybe it wasn't the best intro, but like you can always overcome that, no problem. And as far as a learning curve, they're very forgiving. So to me, there is a carpet python out there for everyone. If you like the natural earthy stuff, popwin carpets can still be imported. So you can verifiably, with 100% certainty, know that you're getting a pure poplar carpet python still, and people are breeding pure lines like myself, and there are morphs and everything. So there's a little bit for everyone. You can do the Dr. Frankenstein morph stuff and have endless amounts of fun, or you can do some pure stuff, some line breeding, some very isolated projects, and make a wonderful name for yourself in just appreciating what these snakes have to offer. And I mean it. There's literally no two carpet pythons that look the same in a clutch. Endless variety. So while everybody goes on their reptile journey, sort of exploring, is this species right for me? Is this not? And we sort of hear stereotypes and what the general consensus is out there. I encourage people to challenge some of those status quos and stereotypes, because it may not be for you, but at least you should try it. But on the off chance it is for you, how bummed would you be if you never gave it a shot because you heard a rumor that they were overly large and aggressive,
Yeah.
and it just
Yeah.
isn't the case.
And
I find them to be very rewarding.
it's a
Yeah.
big reason why when I was getting into larger species of snakes after ball pythons that I went with a boa, and I feel like I would have been more prepared for retics had I just nutted up and gone for Morelia.
There's a lot to be said, man. I've talked at length with folks like Garrett Hartle about the similarities of them, especially when it comes to super dwarf stuff.
Hmm.
Now, granted, I would say super dwarfs, even at their smallest, a female is still like a longer
Hmm.
built animal, but they're really not far off. Behaviorally, a retic is a different animal. They think different, they behave different, and their body language communicates differently. But if you can handle a retic, a carpet python's a walk in the
Oh
park.
yeah. I really like, and I say this like considering that, they're not like, they're a snake that like you you if you keep them as babies, you might get nipped and things like that. Like they're not like kid
Yeah,
proof, but I really do think they are the perfect python. They're not overly
I
big.
rarely get bit by adults.
they're
Rarely get bit
they're
by adults.
they're not overly big. They're not boring and small. They're active and move around when you have them up, and their color spectrums and the morphs and everything that they have are phenomenal. And the best part about them, dude, and I didn't realize this until a few months ago, is they are affordable. Like they are
Yeah,
extremely, and maybe I'm biased because I'm coming from green tree pythons and superdorf and locality retics, right? So maybe I'm a little biased, but you can find a like drop dead gorgeous carpet python for $200.
I could put one in your hands and only set you back $100, and it in a couple of years it would literally look like a
I
prize
knew I shouldn't
specimen
have
that you
gotten your
picked up off the ground, off of somewhere in Australia. I mean, I get very jaded when I'm going for a goal in a clutch, right? And I'm sifting through the babies and I'm just checking on them. And every once in a while, I'll just remind myself to take the time and just inspect each one, even spend as much time on the low end animals as the high end ones. And so, I'll go drool over an axanthic tiger, but then I'll go down a few bins and there's a coastal male that is not striped, and based on his colors is probably not carrying any of the axanthic traits. It's like the quote unquote least desirable in the clutch, right? And I'll pull them out and I'll be like, this thing is going to be a knockout when it's bigger. All of this olive green gray is going to be outlined in black fish netting. You're going to have this buckskin slash bone white pattern that's just breaking it all up everywhere. That's outlined in black ink. And then you have white creeping up from the belly. And it's going to be repeated across this 6 foot alternating pattern that's going to just blow your mind in the small spectrum and across the entire animal. And on top of that, every animal's head stamp is like a defined piece of art. From you can get numbers to like the number 2 or number 7s or number 3s, or like angry faces or smiley faces or O
Dude, I
faces,
love
or
that about them.
like symmetrical 6-point stars, like everything, dude. Like,
They're great.
it's what more could you ask for, man?
No, they really are the perfect Python. I've said that for a while, but they they check nearly every box off. But Nathan, I know you had a question before we tune out.
Well, and it kind of goes along with some of the wrap up stuff. If someone's looking to, do their research, get into carpets the proper way, what are a few, just pieces of literature, or, just other avenues they can go to research these pythons? I know the more complete chondro is going to be probably the best place to start, but is there anything else that you would recommend?
Yeah, there's quite a few great books on Australian reptiles that kind of don't necessarily focus on carpets entirely. But when you kind of browse through books that go through Australian herpetofauna, it kind of gives you a sense overall of like what these things endure and experience, and that they're all kind of built for these similar levels of harshness, from the geckos to the frogs to the monitors to the spiders. But obviously the more complete carpet python is like the more recent publication, and it's got some of the new taxonomic changes. But yeah, that one,
Oh, I said
any
chondro, my bad.
whatever, it's all the same. um we're splitting hairs anyway, aren't we? um uh there's quite a few smaller publications from Scott and Ty Iper that do Nature to You over in Australia. They've got some snake and frog and venomous books and stuff, and so they love their carpet pythons as well. So they get brought up in a lot of the Snakes of Australia books and things like that. So there's a few written publications like that, and then in the thread of Morelia Python Radio going into their 13th year this year, Eric Burke has meticulously cataloged and copied and saved everything he could find in any digital or written form over the last 20 years. And he's put together a beautiful website.
Awesome.
MoreliaPythonRadio.com, I believe, is the domain. I think if you Google it, you'll get to it either way. But he really spent a lot of time breaking down some of the projects, some of the lineages, some of the subspecies. He's got range maps in there. He's kind of the epitome of like the uber nerd, because he's like ascended into,
Oh
I've
yeah.
kept all of them, I've bred everything, now I must go see all of them in the wild, sort of thing. And his collection is reducing, and
It's
his number of
really cool.
Australia is growing. So he's like transcending into this next
Right.
level. So that's a fantastic website to go to get a lot of resources, and he links a lot of resources outwardly from there as
He,
well.
I would imagine he links like podcast episodes that
Yep,
they've done as well, which
yep.
if
You
if
got
you're
12
just
years of that.
yeah, if you're that audiobook person, that would be probably my first
I
suggestion. That's what got me interested, is go listen to
right.
Morelia Python Radio and listen to those
They
two just geek out about, carpets for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and one thing I will say about NPR and the just carpet python community in general, NPR had me on probably, I don't know, 4 to 6 months back or so, to
that
talk
was a
about
great episode, by
to
the way.
It
to
was really good.
thanks
Yeah, it was awesome.
to talk about retics and the dozens and dozens of messages from people in the Morelia community that reached out, said positive things. I got invited to go to Texas Carpet Fest this in 2023, and I went, and just phenomenal community that I got
Yeah,
to
man.
meet in person, that reached out to me. Um right now I'm 10 out of 10 recommend the Carpet Python community. They've been pretty cool.
It feels good to hear that, because I know personally, you know, 7 to 10 years ago, there were a lot of public feelings that we were kind of a bunch of pompous a-holes. And granted, that coincides with all of the infighting about purity versus crossing. So I'm sure it was deserved then. But Yeah, man, Eric and a lot of the guys that started that whole circle out in Maryland, 12 years ago or whatever it was, Howard Redding and Eric Kohler and all those guys, like they've had their ups and downs, and they've kind of rifted apart and come back together at the most recent Carpet Fest, but it's grown into a thing where there's like a chapter all over the country. There's one in the UK, and then there's also one in Australia prior to,
That's
COVID
awesome.
slowing things down. And it's just a testament to, Eric and Owen and the rest of those guys' desire to get out from behind the keyboard and the computer screens and actually meet people face to face and have some of these discussions, and realize that we're all the same but different, and we're just people, and to kind of build that. And I don't think he had any idea like how significant that was going to be in the long run. Because like I've flown out to Philly for Carpet Fest and stayed at Eric's house a couple of years ago, and it was like a dream come true. It was like more exciting to me than
Dude.
an international trip. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I got to hold a young Apodora for the first time there. I one of Eric's jungles like food wrapped my hand, and I just like let him do it and kept going around the room like so excited to see everything. I was like
Epic.
being chewed on and just like this is the happiest thing. So like yeah, man, it's cool. It's a good community, and I think with everybody kind of nowadays realizing that they want to explore new avenues of reptile keeping in different species, I think it's a great time for people to
Yeah.
maybe dabble. And if you want to dabble, I launched my website yesterday,
I
so
did see
rileysreptiles.com.
that. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks, man. Big shout out to Adler for putting that
He
together. So
Yeah, he's doing my site as well. I've been procrastinating on my part with getting with him to put the final pieces together, but I'm excited for that.
yeah, man, it's cool. So I'm excited to have like a legit website with a legit domain that I can, you can go up there, you can see my breeders, you can see the animals. It links to the YouTube. Um, I have a merch store on Teespring, and it doesn't link with the website yet. So we're either going to see if we can figure out how to link those two, or I'll just start over and build a new one through the site because it has
Yeah.
certain add-ons that I can do. But yeah, I spent about a month photographing all the animals in light tents, waiting for them to shed and waiting for
You
some
know
to
that
cooperate.
it's see, that's where size is nice compared to retics, because if I put a page with my breeders on there,
Oh, dude,
I can't take pictures of my
I
freaking
can't even imagine how
13
hard it
foot
is.
Solaire.
You could if you
Yeah,
had the tent I have.
I mean, yeah, but
a garage.
you think yeah, you think
No, this
that
thing's like 4.5 square.
retics don't
Damn.
stand still, dude. They don't
No,
stay
I
still.
got one of those 32-inch cubes, and yeah, some of my snakes made that look small. The Crebos, they're like, yeah, no, we don't do that. Sorry.
Exactly. But
Well, yeah, everyone, I mean, go on to Riley's website. That'll lead you to everything, but make sure you're subscribed to his YouTube, following his Instagram. Riley, anything else you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I would say if you were worried about me talking about bites more, I'm glad we have, didn't make it about a big scary bite thing, because I do get bit, but it's usually by lizards.
no, it's
They're
by
the ones that
monitors.
do
I
more
know
damage.
you just had your thumb knot on a few months ago.
Yeah, so my thumb was filleted like a nice juicy steak in October, and that was fun. It's about as far down as it goes before I feel like the skin on top is about to split open.
Literally, that
Um,
doctor like 100% needed stitches, and the dude at the hospital was like, "Yeah, you'll be fine."
I would have at least been happy with some local anesthetic before they started digging and cleaning it, but what am I gonna say? I'm not a doctor. But
Right.
yeah, lizards cause way more like damaging snake bites. I got a rhino iguana bite to the forearm that earned me 6 stitches, and but at the same time, I've been popped in the temple by a scrub. I've been hit in the eyebrow, nose, forehead, nose, chin, cheek by various carpet pythons, and they don't even leave a mark usually.
Hmm.
Um, you know, it's really the reaction of you making it something bigger in your head and then flinching and pulling away
That's
and
yeah.
breaking teeth and running your finger along the whole jaw. And yeah, you make it worse
Any
that way.
any any
So
s- any snake bite can be exponentially worse if you have that knee jerk reaction, which I haven't been bit a lot, so I still have that reaction at times, and I need to get over it. That's for sure.
I think I forced myself to get over it with a lot of baby Brazilian rainbow boas because they're little bitey things as they're firstborn.
Yes,
Yeah.
And
they are.
I produced well over 100 of those over the last decade. And the first time I took one and it bit me and I flinched and the thing went flying backwards across the room and landed on my bed. It landed on my bed, so it was fine. The first time I did that, I was like, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't want to do that." So I sort of forced myself to like take it, don't flinch, and now it's probably gone too far on the spectrum where I probably should flinch a little bit more in some cases.
King Cobra's coming at you. You're like,
Hug me.
oh man.
Yeah, I've worked around crocodilians. I've worked around a lot of venomous. Obviously, very safely with hooks and two people teams and all the safety protocols in place and anti venom on hand and all that good stuff. But yeah, I take liberties when I know I can.
Yeah,
When
For
it's
sure.
with crocodilians and venomous, there are no liberties taken because you just you should be very zoned and professional in that and very focused on the task at hand. But with carpet pythons, man, I just want to be hands on with them. I like when they go back into their enclosure, running the whole body through my hand and they come back around and you can just gently nudge their face back in. And they're just really, really tolerant snakes, man. And
They're
like,
calm animals. The ones I held at
they
Bill,
really
man,
are.
they're super. Just
Yeah.
they had that calm demeanor when you had them out. They move slowly, but they're continuously moving and they're looking around and yeah, they're great. But Riley, it was an absolute awesome episode. It was awesome having you on. We'll dude, you're such a wealth of knowledge. We'll absolutely have you on again for
yeah.
multiple topics. And honestly,
Just to
if
talk about the zoo would be a
right,
2 hour long episode, I'm sure.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
man.
I would love to have you on once you successfully hit those outdoors. That's gonna be so
Fingers crossed.
freaking
Yeah,
amazing.
we're rooting for you.
Um,
Fingers crossed, man.
but yeah, man, we'll let you go. And guys, again, if you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and comment, leave something for Riley to respond to. Riley, we're gonna kick you out of here and do our wrap up. But it was great having you on, man.
Thanks, guys. I've got work in the morning, so I'll be wrapping up. I appreciate y'all having me on. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on this podcast. I remember when you guys launched it. I was really excited to see what you guys have done with it, and I blinked and you're already into the 70 plus episodes. So,
It's wild.
It
um,
is.
yeah, man, keep up the great work. Kudos to you guys. Hats off. I love seeing where you're going with it. I had a great time, man. Really enjoyed it.
Likewise, man. Thanks again.
Thank you both.
Good
Talk
night.
to you guys soon.
See you, Riley. All right.
Great
Yeah,
episode.
like you said, man, we could go on and on and on. Just a total treasure chest of just information regarding any species that guy has touched.
Yeah, and
Eh,
there's like a dozen phenomenal people that we could have had on for
Oh
pythons, but
yeah,
I've seen enough of the interviews that Riley has done in his YouTube channel, and I think that this episode and the way that it went kind of like in our minds, like this is why I wanted to, we wanted to have Riley on. Like Riley is just a great dude to talk to.
yeah. So I have to shout out Brian Cusco. I mean that's who got both Lucas and I face to face with Riley the first time, got us chatting. Um, it's cool to have those people in the industry that are making those connections and building community. So thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, if you like this episode, like it. If you, like I mentioned, want to drop some comments down below. And as always, to our Patreon members that are supporting us monthly, thank you so much. We love you guys. We had a great Zoom call the night before we recorded this. I think it was our biggest one yet with a few new faces on there. We meet every other Friday for about an hour to an hour 15. Maybe sometimes it gets, to an hour 30. We have a great time, and it's not like anything educational. We're just a bunch of people like-minded loving reptiles that just meet up on Zoom and have a great conversation. So if you want to do that, at the lowest, only $5 a month. And you can visit us at the Patreon or patreon.com/TheReticLounge. But Nate, you got anything else?
No, I'm excited for next week. I look forward to seeing you on the next one, Lucas.
Yep. See you guys.
Later.